Welcome back to the manor. Julian McBain here, and we're back to hunting merfolk for a bit. Because I'm finding this low-level stuff to be actually quite engaging. And I think perhaps it's because it's not high stakes. And at some point I need to do a longer segment where I'm doing like a large hunt, maybe 100 ped, at this level to see what the efficiency rating is. And it might be more than that. I don't know the last time I actually did a hunt that large at this level, but it's been a long... I know I've done it before, but it's been a long time. I think it took me more than an hour. But that will not be tonight because, unfortunately, I don't have the time tonight. But we will have some stuff to talk about. Before we get started, though, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please go over to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you get copies of the Modern Entropian and Personal Finance for Gamers for being a member. Thank you for your support. Okay, speaking of which, I need to fix my ending tile. I can do that later. So in my last video, I was talking about building a network within Entropia universe and how important it is for you to utilize the people that you meet on the platform in order to be more successful yourself. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people they don't realize just how important it is. I mean, if you treat this like a standard MMORPG, it's going to work just like an MMORPG, where you have to put in your monthly fees, and that will pay for your gameplay, and in the end, you're going to have some rewards, but in all likelihood, especially since this is a real cash economy, the total amount that you're going to have at the end of the month will be smaller than it was at the beginning of the month. And to be frank, for most players, that's the way it's going to be. Statistically speaking, only a small number of people will be successful enough to really make gains on the platform. That's just the way it works. That's the way real life works. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. That being said, you can leverage your friends to help you become more successful and in turn make them more successful. This is how business works in real life. Well, how do you do that? Well, I described most of that in my last video. If you have not watched it, go back and watch it. But there are other things you can also do in order to make those things more successful. And I'm going to discuss a couple of them because these are the more complex ones. They are much harder to do because it requires a lot of cooperation. One of the things that you can conceivably do, and I honestly think that a lot of the traders, the sweat traders have done this. Not all traders. I don't want to throw them all under the bus, but the sweat resellers have done. And because of the changes that the planet partners have done, it's actually limited the amount of power they have over this because the demand has gone up so high. The sweat sellers actually basically created a cartel. The resellers. Not the people actually sweating the mobs, but the resellers. What they do is they're willing to buy small amounts of sweat off of a bunch of other players. They stack it all up. And then they will sell it in bulk to crafters or take the risk and transport it to other planets to sell to people who need it on those planets. Now that's all well and good. That being said, when sweat was in low demand, they kept pushing the price of sweat that we were willing to buy at down to the point where I even saw it as low as 80 pec, 0.8 ped. Now, for a person who is in the sweat fields all the time, that's a lot of your time for very little return. You know, back in the day, way back in the day, it used to be as much as 10 ped per 1,000. And of course that dwindled as the uses of sweat kind of dwindled. And then of course Mindark added synthetic mind essence, which kind of buggered the market. Because, you know, who's going to buy an ingredient for something that you don't need to make anymore? So they've been kind of trying to come up with more reasons to need sweat, which the planet partners have totally stepped up to. Arcadia started by having the 10,000 sweat requirement for the passport for non-Arcadian borns. Which, by the way, I totally have, and I totally ground out 100% on my own. There are actually videos of me doing that. Go check them out later. But what the sellers did is they decided, and I don't know how this was, whether it was by fiat or this is just the way it happened, or if they actually got together and talked about it. They essentially formed a cartel, which said you can only sell, the people grinding it out can only sell sweat in small lots to us for this low price, and then we're going to turn around and sell it for a much higher price to the crafters. And it may not have been much. It may have gone from 0.8 ped per K to the sweaters to 1.2 ped per K to the crafters. Maybe they were trying to pull it down so they could sell their sweat more cheaply, but I doubt it. Because there are still players to this day. Sweat's now on. I just sold 15,000 sweat for 15, 14. It was for 1.2, and I ended up with 16 ped because he gave me a little bit extra. Because it was going to be 15.7. So hang on a second. Let me do some math. Not 15.7, but I think it was 15.8. It was 13,000. It was 13,000. It came out to be like 15.6 or something in that ballpark. They gave me 16 ped. So that means that at least on Cyrene, that's the market value of sweat. Because I tend to keep Entropia Universe running in the background, I'll be sweating Panleons while I'm doing other things. Like today, I was sweating all day, but I was not sitting at my computer. I was actually cleaning, and I just run back, kill the mob, sweat the next one. And there are a lot of people who do that. It's honestly, it's not much different from botting, except I'm actually paying attention. And a lot of sweaters are bots, which is probably why the sweat market got flooded when there was low demand for sweat, which drove the price down. Market forces can be a bitch sometimes. That being said, the sweat sellers are not stupid, and they knew that the market was being flooded, so they pushed the price down harder than maybe it was strictly necessary, and they reaped the rewards. And it may have only been 5 or 10 peck per thousand, but you multiply that by hundreds of thousands of bottles, you're making money. And you know what? I'm not going to criticize them too much. I do think that there is a certain amount of assholery that goes into forming a cartel like that, but in order to form that cartel, you actually have to work with other people, come up with an agreement of some sorts, even if it's unspoken, to gather and sell sweat at certain prices. And of course, you want to undercut your competition without undercutting your profits. So there is a certain amount of unspoken agreement that goes into that works with those market forces. And sweat at the time, back before the Gorgon armor became a thing over on Next Island, was a commodity that you could fix the price on because there was so much of it out there. So many players wanted to play for free. They were just sweating their lives out. And because there was all this sweat and nowhere for it to go, it drove the price down. So in some ways, the sweat farmers, for lack of a better term, the sweat farmers were actually shooting themselves in the foot by being too efficient at it. And I think there is a certain balance that is to be made there. But realistically, if you want to play for free, that's what you have to do. You have to either farm the sweat or go fruit walking. No other ways to play for free. That's life. So I don't know what the actual sweat per K average price is right now. I got lucky enough to find someone who wanted to sell it for 1.2. It might be as high as 1.5 on average, and it might depend. It will depend on what planet you're on, because it's harder to find someone doing sweating on Cyrene, or it used to be. Now it's not. I'm finding all kinds of people doing sweating on Cyrene now. Than say on Next Island, where there's a demand for sweat, or on Calypso, where there's a demand for sweat, although reduced. And then you have to decide if I'm going to sweat on a planet where there's low demand, which means there's not many sweaters, which means there's a little competition for sweat mobs, which are often in the starter zone, or they're in big places that are designed for that have been set up for sweat circles like Club Royal, and then risk transporting it across space where there are still pirates. They're not very common anymore, but they do exist, and they will shoot your ass down. Most commonly between Calypso and Monria. Please be careful. So that was probably the most effective use of networking. And I don't know if it was deliberate or if it was just by unspoken arrangement where they kept pushing the price down that they bought sweat out so they could get the extra peck because of the lack of demand, which makes a certain amount of sense, I suppose, because, you know, when you're a trader, you're taking a lot of fiscal risk, relatively speaking, right? For example, you've got my buddy Bob Silent. He's a trader. If I sell him mats, right? He now takes the risk. If he purchases mats off me that he wants to resell, he now takes on the risk that he will not be able to sell those mats for a profit. They take up storage room, they need to be transported, they might need to be transported, or he has to pay auction fees and take the risk of the auction fees. That drives up the price that he needs to make off of it in order to make it worthwhile. And if he makes zero net off of it, it was a waste of his time, because he also lost the time value of money. He also lost the time with which he held it. That costs money. The time that you hold things actually costs you money. It has a negative impact on your bottom line. That's the way it works in business, that's the way it works in real life, and that's the way it works in Entropia universe. So he will buy it off me cheaper than I could sell it, say, at auction house, and I accept that lower value for the guarantee that I sell it. And the same probably happened in the sweat markets. And to a certain extent, I believe that to be the case, and to a certain extent, I do think that they were futzing the markets, and I do think they did it on purpose. But please forgive the dog barking in the background if you can hear her. But that being said, I also think that it was not one factor. It was not one factor. I'm glad to see the sweat market coming back up. I'm glad to see that the value that free-to-play players are able to get from the platform is increasing again. The grind is going to be a little less difficult for them. And to a certain extent, me, because I am working on doing more free-to-play. Not just because of the money thing, because obviously I invest the money into this channel. The amount that I get off my Patreon goes straight into here every month. Oftentimes I use it to either hunt or to pick up deeds and shares so that I can have a perpetual fund coming in, because that's the way I used to do it, and that's the way I should be doing it even now. I buy universal ammo, I spend the universal ammo down, right? I sell the mats I get, and then the PED from the mats goes into deeds and shares. And what that does is it generates income. Pretty simple. And that's the way I recommend a lot of players play if you want to turn this into a self-funding addiction. Because that's what it is. It's an addiction. It's not a bad addiction, especially compared to other things you could be addicted to. But it is an addiction. And if the addiction is self-funding, you don't have to worry about how much you're putting into it because it funds itself. And as an example, I think this month I'm probably looking at pulling 40 and 50. I might get 60 PED out of it. That's $6 US. It's not a huge amount, but it's definitely not nothing. And so if you can do the same thing, and keep in mind, I've been doing this for going on 3 years. No, 17, 18. Did I start in 17? Yeah, because I moved back in 17. Holy shit, I'm going on 4 years. I'm going on 4 years in Entropia universe, folks. And so I built it up over time. That's how you do it too. And maybe you don't play it. Last year I played at a very intense level. Put out a lot of content because of it. And I had a great time. I had to pull back this year because, well, 2020 is 2020. And that's all I think. 2020 is going to become an adjective. Okay? And we're just going to go like, yeah, someone 2020'd that. And everyone's just going to bow their heads and go, yup, we know how that works. I swear to God, this is going to happen. It's going to be like a verb, not an adjective. It'll be a verb. It'll be both, because someone 2020'd that, or that's pretty 2020-ish. You know what I'm saying? I swear to God, that's going to happen. I do. So, but anyway, back on topic. So yeah, that was the major point I wanted to make, was the sweat markets and how it's been changing, and the real effect that networking can have on how you play the game or use the platform. I have to, it is a game, but it's more a platform than a game, because you can do more than just play. You can earn money on this. You can set up a business. You can just socialize. I know players who get on here and they do nothing but chat. That's what they use it for. It's like their Facebook, except it's not curated. It's a chat room. You know, that's what this is. This right here, rookie chat, this is like the classic chat room from way back in the day, when you just go in and chat with people from all over the place, and you wouldn't know who they actually are, and you get to know them by their handle. And we're talking like early dial-up days. And I know there are people who watch this who are my age or older who remember those. God, that was back when the internet was the Wild West. And then you have chat from different planets. Like, I've got Monria chat up. I always have Monria chat up. Not that I super engage with it. I'll go between periods where I'm super engaged, and I'll have time periods where I'm not very engaged. And that's part of the love of this platform. But I wanted to really focus in on the sweat resell cartel that existed, and I think to a certain extent still exists today, because of the effect it had on the market, and how the market actually came about and turned it around by creating new demand, by developers creating new demand for it. And that's where this market isn't 100% open, because the players themselves cannot just create demand. I mean, we could artificially, or we might focus on something that utilizes a lot of sweat and make that product popular, which would increase the demand of it. But by creating something that fixes an increased demand, that makes it worthwhile to help counteract another... What is this? Oh, wow. Just this random hole. Creates a really cool effect, though, but Jesus, don't fall in that. Get stuck. Now I kind of want to explore there, but we won't, because I don't feel like having to wait for the teleporter. So, but yeah, those are the possibilities you can have on this platform. And I think that, let's take out one more. I think that there is still a lot of unexplored potential on Entropia Universe, and I want to see what other players come up with. Come up with something novel. Come up with something new. Like, if you go to Delusionists, Zenexion on YouTube, go check out his channel. He hasn't put out any content in a long time, but the content he has is fantastic. There's a video on there where he is doing heal support for an event where someone gave out a whole bunch of skill deck lance heads and explosive projectiles and told them to go hunt a whole bunch of newbies, go hunt a bunch of the level 3 Argos on Calypso. And it was hilarious, because there's just fucking rockets flying everywhere, and you can't see because the smoke, explosive projectiles create the smoke effect. So you just couldn't see because there were just too many rockets going on. It was hilarious. You know, come up with something novel and then market it and see what happens. I think that you would find that there is plenty of potential on this platform. But with that being said, it is time for me to go. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time. So make sure you subscribe. And as always, everyone, I really appreciate all the support. Thank you to my patrons who are listed here on the right. And we will see you in the next one.